Hey, this is Muichimotsu back from a very long break, and I guess I thought it would be good to try to do something before Thanksgiving, so I'm gonna see if I can do a two-parter here on the origin of my name that I use, Muichimotsu. The I'll get to the basics of the concept itself in the next video. For now, I think it'd be better just to explain my interest in it and where it originated from, little stories I have in my memory about it, that sort of thing. So, to start off, I read Gensomaden Sayuki, or otherwise just known as Sayuki here. 9-volume manga series, but it goes into other sections. Sayuki Reload, Sayuki, I think it's Gunlock or something to that effect. It's a nice series, though. Either way, I'd recommend it, regardless of if you appreciate the Buddhist undertones that come into it. Particularly, they're very Zen Buddhist undertones, but regardless, the point of the matter is that's where I really got particularly interested. And as you can see in the pictures, there is a particular character. If you know anything about Sayuki, this guy is one of the four main characters anyway, Genjo Sanzo, based on the monk of a similar name in Chinese that journeyed from. Yeah, he was actually, I believe, he was a Chinese monk, the original version of the story, and he travels to India to get these sutras. And from there, the story progresses as he gets new teammates and the like. But on to how Muichimotsu comes into this. It's not a consistent theme, but it does come up near particularly the end, when they come up against a very dangerous foe who resembles Sanzo, has some similar skills, but he's also uses prayer beads and he hurts you with those. It's very interesting, but very bizarre at the same time. Anyway, eventually Sanzo starts ruminating on a teaching from his previous from his master who has been dead for a while, and it's Muichimotsu, and he uses that to motivate himself to fight basically. Although there's a little more to it. I mean, it's kind of how he pushes himself to get stronger, you could say, or it's simply what keeps him from succumbing to death, you might say, because that's part of it. I mean, the fact that he is pretty much in Sayuki itself, in the manga anyway, he is very much unlike a monk. He curses, he drinks, he smokes, he does virtually everything that's against the five precepts that were originally put forth in Buddhism anyway, and yet he has this worldly wisdom, you might say, that allows him to have a great deal of insight into things that you otherwise wouldn't be able to have insight into because of the fact that you're perhaps too focused on the monastic tradition itself, which he reflects on that a few times, or at least the one time I can think of where they actually meet up with a group of monks at a temple, and they basically are criticizing him and his group for smoking and drinking and playing mahjong, which is apparently considered gambling, you know, all those sorts of things, and then he just says, I don't care, screw you. Not to mention, the monks, almost all of them get murdered by demons, and he just says, it might be more important for you to try to keep your own skin alive as opposed to trying to be all pacifist. I mean, he's very much not a pacifist, as one might, at least on the surface, see Buddhism as affirming to a great extent. But then again, we're talking about Zen Buddhism, so a great deal of my interest in this was already stemming from the fact that I had an interest in Zen Buddhism and the methods that involve more practical experience of life, being mindful of the impermanence of life, etc. Anyway, to continue on, I mean, it was thanks to my interest in Sayuki that I cosplayed as Dr. Nee from the series. He's very interesting. But moving on, the one story that I can think of that I can tell you is a little story when I was, I believe I was a freshman in college, and the fact that we all went through multiple Japanese teachers because the university at the time was still trying to get the Asian Studies program off the ground. And the first one we had, he wasn't actually apparently qualified to actually teach Japanese properly, but he was, college educated and the like, so they figured he was only really teaching maybe one or two classes, so, or even just one class. So they figured he had enough free time, he could just teach the sections of Japanese, and he did. And I remember asking him about it, and he did a pretty decent explanation, although admittedly he was surprised, I think, that I had the interest in Zen Buddhism that I did. And I think the first question I was asking was about Zazen, or just the concept of Zen, etc. But then eventually I was inquiring into Muichimotsu. And after I got the kanji themselves, at least for Muichimotsu itself, he explained each of them. The first kanji is for nothing, the second is just a kanji for the number one, and then the last kanji is a verb, which means literally anyway, to hold, but in Japanese that can have nuances of just holding something in your hand, or possessing something, or even perhaps it could be construed, I think, in the Buddhist sense of clinging or attachment, but I'm stretching it there, admittedly. You might have heard that the virus scan completed. Anyway, I'm doing this on the first take. I'm not going to redo it. I'm already 6 minutes into this. But anyway, yeah, he actually gave me some other interpretations. Like, I mean, he had never admittedly heard of Muichimotsu because it is somewhat esoteric and based in, admittedly, I think a Chinese monk that had, what's the word? He had moved to Japan. He was teaching there, basically. But I'll get into that in the next part. But anyway, he said he had heard of Ichimotsu, which I believe he said was something to the effect of, I don't know. I think he might have said it meant something a little vulgar, but I can check right now really quickly if I can get to the damn link. Ugh. I mean, Ichi and then Motsu. I mean, the tricky part is always trying to combine the kanji themselves. So in a sense, I mean, Mu-ichi could just mean nothing, one, but it could mean just nothing entirely. Ichimotsu. The dictionary, yeah. Yeah, it can mean penis, apparently. I guess that's why the professor, yeah, he was kind of, you could call him a stereotypical Japanese guy. He didn't like talking about particular things. I mean, he could talk about his family, but it was usually subtle. Apparently, it can also mean an ulterior motive or just a thing in general, but it can also mean penis. So it's a little naughty, you might say. And then in the full understanding of Muichimotsu, I think he had an interpretation at least, because I mean, native Japanese as he was, he probably had heard of it, or maybe he could take a interpretation of it. I mean, he interpreted to hold nothing, or to hold not a single thing, and that was, to an extent, what it actually meant, so he wasn't far off. And this thing isn't loading, so anyway, basics are right there. I pursued it a little bit more, and I've actually managed to. There's actually an article by Sam Harris, who wrote The End of Faith and Letter to a Christian Nation, and he actually wrote a little bit on the similar phrase, and I'll recite the entire phrase as I recall it. Let's see. If you meet the Buddha, kill the Buddha. If you meet the patriarchs, kill the patriarchs. Free of all, bound by nothing, you live your life simply as it is. And I'll repeat it once more, roughly. As you're walking on the road, if you meet the Buddha, kill the Buddha. If you meet the patriarchs, kill the patriarchs. Free of all, bound by nothing, you live your life simply as it is. That is to hold nothing. That is Muichimotsu. And that is that's the origin of my name. I use it for screen names all the time. Anyway, I'm running out of time here, but I will get into the next part for hopefully a little shorter video on explaining the basics of it. And this is more fun. The other one's a little less fun. Anyway, that's all for this one. See you later.